Want to beat your mates at fantasy football? I've got a little secret for you.
Fantasy Football Hub offers AI team ratings to enhance your team, AI recommended transfers to ensure you make the right decisions, and a new AI assistant chatbot, all designed to help you win your FPL mini league. Upload a screenshot of your FPL team for an instant free AI team rating. And if you sign up and don't win your mini league, we'll even refund your membership. Terms apply. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Green Arrow FPL podcast from Fantasy Football Hub. We have Wildcard fever, as Rich loves it, ahead of Gameweek 6, with all three of us active on Wildcard this week. My name is Fergi, and I'm here as usual with Rich Clarke. Rich, how are you? And what colour was your arrow in Gameweek 5?
Hi, Fergie. I'm fine, thank you. Hi, everyone. I have had a bit of time off, and obviously had a holiday the previous week that I came back from. Missed game week 4 while I was away. Had 2 days to turn things around. I think I did the pod last week, but then I went away on a golf weekend to Bristol.
Living your best life, Rich, I think that's called.
Exactly. No, it's not a bad life, absolutely. But I haven't seen much football, and therefore didn't really. I got scrabbled the team together. Wasn't 100% sure whether to wildcard, and I thought I'd see how the weekend went. I think I got 68 points, so not bad. A few returns from players that had taken a while to get going, like Rodgers and Henderson. Both returning well after nothing so far. So that kind of saved things. The swing towards Salah, João Pedro. 2 weeks of home matches didn't really work out, did it? The João Pedro's played about 12 minutes and he's still injured, I believe. 1 or 2 questions in the chat already about that. So that's not worked out. But I think kind of that commitment to the sell Saka, get Salah, play the game week 5 captaincy thing didn't really pay off. It was probably a good decision, but a bad outcome. What it feels like, because you've got to set yourself up to get lucky, right? So it's kind of pushed me into wildcarding, though. In the end, I was slow getting to it because I was away with the boys, but also because I wanted to see how the weekend went, and I was about 80% on it. I think those that were 100% planning to wildcard have probably done better because they've got probably 500,000 price increases already that I've missed out on. So I'm not feeling great about it all. I think I'm up in just about scraped into the top 2 mil, I think now. So it was a green arrow, but not great. But looking forward to changing it all around. Enough wrong with the team. I think if you've got it on screen, Muniz has been dropped now. Hall can't be relied upon to start games. João Pedro's certainly a busted flush for a while. Barco since the game week 1. No Arsenal players in the side. It's enough, isn't it? Really,
it is
to have to play the ups.
And Henderson, even though he had the 9 points, he's been a real disappointment this year. He had a stormer last week. He's been dreadful this season, but he had a stormer last week, didn't he? But
he made some very good saves in there against United. But enough there to justify it.
Indeed, agree. As you can see, we have the brilliant Luke Williams with us again. Great to have you with us, Luke. Luke joined us in pre-season. How has your season gone so far, mate?
Oh, thanks for having me on, man. It's been steady, I guess you could describe it as. Like I'm top million, but it's because I'm just about top million. I think I'm just outside now, but it's because the last game week was like particularly bad. It feels a little bit worse. And then when I look back through my weeks, I don't know, there's probably quite a few people, or maybe you two are quite similar, but certainly I think people in the chat will be similar, where it seems like Haaland basically scores me points every week and no one else does anything.
Yeah, same.
So it's a bit strange. A few regrets, not going as robust as I probably should have from game week 1. Old habits die hard there. That's probably hurt me. Stuff like going Lewis Hall over Consa. The boring pick wins in the end. It just happens so often. I actually went Pau Torres as well, which makes it even worse because you wouldn't expect the difference to be so big between them, but here we are. So yeah, I mean, I think 65 I got this week. I kind of got a bit screwed this week overall because I think, again, similar to a lot of people, I guess, I had João Pedro, who was flagged. I had Isak, who was flagged. Didn't know whether he was going to play. I've got Barco on my bench. So I only had 2 active subs, and then where I had it probably an extra step than other people, I actually had Kevin De Bruyne. I feel like it's always these ones that hurt the most, right? Because he's a bit of a differential. I did well on the minutes. He got like literally 90 minutes, like 2 games back to back. Looked fantastic. Like hitting the bar all over the place, setting Haaland up, XGI through the roof. And he got 3 points over the 2 games. So he got booked in 1 for a 1, a 2. And then that extra bit that really pushed me for this game, because then he went and got injured, didn't he, in the Champions League game. So I ended up with 3 flags, only 2 subs. So I was kind of forced into a position where originally I was literally going to do Saka to Son and captain. I was just going to ignore Salah. I would have done so well off of that because Son got the 2 assists. Smith Rowe would have then come off my bench. I'd be sat here with like 70, 80 points or whatever, loving life. Instead, I block Smith Rowe on my bench. I get Saka in as captain. Have you got the violin music again?
I should have. If you'd have warned me, the violin music
I should have warned you, shouldn't I? So, it was going well. It was going steady, although Haaland was doing a lot of heavy lifting. And then this last week was just pretty bad overall. So I'm on a bit of a downer. Just like the weather, it's been a bit of a washout. But hopefully with a wild card, I can sort it out again.
I think you're okay, mate. I know you've had a bad week, but you've had a decent-ish start, I think. You've had a solid start, wildcard active. Million at this point is, it's no disgrace at all. I'm kind of lower than you, and I'm looking at my mini leagues, and I was thinking, I'm like 1.7 million. Looking at my mini leagues, though, I'm all right. I'm in the top sort of third, which at this point of the season, wildcard active is fine. So yeah, off the back of a tough week, but overall a decent start, I think. I've got what did I get? I got 63 points, a hat trick of João Pedro 1-pointers, I played Jota. And how many times over the years, if you hadn't done something, tried to be clever with your team, you'd have just had a few more points, or a lot of points, but a few more points. I thought, well, Muniz is bent. I tell you what, I'll try and be a bit clever, and I'll play Howard Bellis. And Southampton's clean sheet was busted in like the 90th minute or wherever it was. So I would have had the 6 of Howard Bellis. As it was, I got 2. If I had just left it alone, I would have had Muniz assist off the bench for Jota, an extra 2 points. But it just happens so often. It's so frustrating. Gordon, nothing. He was the only player really. I've got like a differential, where others have got other kinds of players. But yeah, 63. I think we're all much of a muchness. I think it sounds like all 3 of us have had a bit of a meh sort of start, an okay start, but this is where it gets exciting now. I think first wildcard is pretty exciting, isn't it? So yeah,
well, this is the big one. I mean, this is the one where you've sort of got the first few miles down the road. Now you're settling for the core part of the season. So this is really the important one to get right, isn't it? Because you could have this team for 25 weeks, and therefore it's all about managing your transfers from this point. So this really feels like the most important set of decisions we're going to make for a while.
The way you just said this is the big one just reminded me of that Gary Neville meme or whatever the video where it goes, this is the banker, this is the one that can't. That's what it is. We can't lose from you, boys.
Yeah. No, it is. It's really important, really exciting. There's so many options as well. I'm trying to build a team. I've definitely got a pool of about 22 players, but as Rich, you always say, and you're right, it's always the combinations, isn't it? It's X, is it A and B, or do I go for A and C, or C and D and wherever else? And it's building up those combinations. I think I got about, as you rightly said, I think I probably got about 500,000 value on you, because I went early on Saturday afternoon. I had, I don't do kind of rage stuff very often. And I wasn't raging, but I saw a number of players were potentially going up on the hub price predictor. Obviously, the transfers in and out are massively exaggerated around kind of wildcard time, but it showed a lot of the players I wanted were going up in price. A few were going down. I think over the 2 days, I got 3 or 4 rises, especially off players I wanted, like Luis Diaz was one. João Pedro. João Pedro actually went down, so I took him out before his drop. Got the option to bring him back. Probably won't now. He's injured. Gordon dropped as well, and there was another player who rose. I can't remember who it was now. Raya rose in price as well. Things like that. So yeah, interesting stuff. Before we dive into wildcard picks for the last time this season, we're just going to do a bit of a promo, and it is your last chance. A final reminder to get 50% off Fantasy Football Hub, and we are still running the Win Your FPL Mini League or Your Money Back offer, but these offers do finish this weekend, so 30th of September, which is Monday. These finish at midnight, so if you're still unsure, use the top link in the description below, grab a bargain, get everything you need to enjoy FPL to its fullest, including winning those mini leagues. So we've got the fixtures up now, gents. Luke, you mentioned just before we went on air about, you'd planned Wildcard 6 pretty much in pre-season. How are you kind of feeling about it now, and what are your what are the things you're thinking about at the moment as we go into this phase of the season?
Yeah, I always had it down for 6. I think the main reason really is that I don't have the energy to focus on any more than that from the beginning. I want to try and narrow down that window to pick my players that, I'm happy with and really focus on those fixtures. And that, I think we've discussed it before, that comes from like the Sky background and stuff, really just having those narrow windows and forced wildcards and stuff. And it's like, just makes it easier for me. And I thought that looked like a pretty good window. Ideally, it would normally be like sort of 7 or 8 weeks and maybe get a little bit more information. But I just felt the fixture switch between Arsenal, it kind of worked at that point. And that was the main reason. So I'm happy about doing it. I think now that I think a lot of people sort of come to that conclusion because it seems a very popular week overall, doesn't it? And I know some people left it in that situation where I'll see what I'm like when I get to there. But then because of that, we've got, like you've mentioned, quite a lot of price changes happening as well. So it's always good to try and do it in a week where you might actually benefit, at least value-wise, if even if the wild card ends up being a washout for whatever reason, because that can happen, at least we'll have won in some regard, right? We'll have got a little bit extra value. So yeah, I'm pretty happy about doing the wild card at that point. I was dead ending to it, so I never had any other option really at that point. My team was a mess with the De Bruyne injury and the other bits and pieces, players going down all over the place. So
it's worked out nicely for you. A bit of relief on Saturday to press the button by the sound of it.
Absolutely, yeah. I was more than happy to do that. So yeah, I mean, I've been sort of chopping and changing. I've had quite a lot of time to spend because I've had a few days off work, and I'm sad enough to just sit here on my computer and sort of click the buttons over and over. So that's what I've been doing.
Mate, it's living your best life. Rich has been away on holiday and he's been on a golf weekend. Can barely squeeze in FPL. You've got your priorities right. You've been actively sorting your wild card out, and things like family, work, they come second, mate. So well done. Exactly. Good stuff.
It may not look like it, but this is what peak performance looks like, everyone.
Absolutely. Brilliant.
I am joking, of course. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy about it. I mean, I think when we go through our teams and locks and stuff, I don't know if you want me to start doing that now, but I'd imagine we're going to, as is the way of things these days, I imagine there's going to be quite a lot of players that are very similar across everyone. And I know you get people moaning about that. All content creators all pick the same team and rah, rah, rah. I'm still convinced that if we were all put into 3 separate rooms and didn't, well, we haven't spoke, have we?
We haven't.
So I'd be surprised if they're not very similar anyway. Or even if we cut off the noise in general, I guess, if you're on Twitter or whatever. At the end of the day, we know we've got the same information to hand, like broadly, haven't we? We've got the same fixtures that are coming up. We've got the same, the form of the players, expected value, however we want to use it in your mind from an algorithm, whatever it is. The same injuries. And like you said, I think you said right at the beginning, you got sort of 20 to 25 player pool. I imagine most people are sat around that number, and it's just working out which way you want to go. And probably about 7 or 8 of those players are pretty nailed. So yeah, that's where I am at the moment, just playing with the edge pieces. And where I end up will probably be luck, to be honest, like anything, even at the beginning of the season. As usual, probably one of the other sort of 5 drafts you made probably do even better, but that's fantasy football, right? You have to get lucky. You end up on the bingo card, the right one.
Just on transfers, well, like you took a hit last week, I think. Right?
That's because of the De Bruyne, Isak, Barco, Pedro situation. Okay. So I didn't want to do that. I think I might be the first person in the history of FPL to take a hit this season.
Yeah, I agree. No, it's just interesting because even though we're all wildcard, and I think we're all in slightly different positions as well. Rich, I think you've got 2 saved.
Yeah, I've got 2. So assuming I can set up and roll through 7, I'll have 4 in game week 8, which is quite nice. That's got to be. That's if I've calculated that correct. Yeah, that's got to be something worth aiming for when I think about setting up. So not try and bust it too much for this week. Make sure that my team still sets up well game week 7 without the need to make a transfer, because then I could almost like do, as you say, a double mini or mini wild card then anyway, if there are people going in game week 8. And as Luke says, I'm pretty sure I won't get everything right, so they'll be wanting to reverse out some of these decisions around that time, because that's when when the Arsenal run comes to an end. So you can go hard on it now and then maybe change it around again. So yeah, it is. I think there's a big difference between having just that extra save transfer and not having anything. At least that's something for this week.
And what are your just to say, we've just that. I didn't even know we had super chats switched on, but we've just had a super chat. Well, no,
Excellent.
I didn't know we had. It was it's our first ever one, but it's just reminded me just before we carry on to say hello to the chat as well and everyone in just before we carry on. Ron is in. Jacob Woods is in. I'm 9074 says the who is the injured Arsenal player saga adds a little jeopardy. That is interesting. There's someone who's potentially got a longest term injury and they don't know. I think the rumours are it could be Timber, but is that right? I don't know if you guys know any more.
So we don't think that was just Arteta referring to David Raya. Then,
I don't think so. I was chatting to a couple of people earlier.
Timber's been in training since, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Chatting to a couple of people.
I'm at least 95% sure it's complete nonsense. Full stop. To be honest, but
okay, cool.
Right.
Okay,
Calafiori, if anyone, I think maybe.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Ben White. Ben White has since come out as it looks like because he was already nursing an injury, wasn't he? And he came on for half.
Okay.
And then subsequently, the information seems to be that it might just be Ben White.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well, that is one to keep an eye on. Definitely. That is interesting though, because that could potentially change. If Ben White's out for a few weeks or a couple of months, I think that opens the door potentially to Timber being more of a decent option at 5.5. I would say, just as an example, the kind of knock-on effect you have with that is quite interesting. Thinking on my feet there. Sorry. Dave Kent is in. MT777. Oberis all the way from Washington. Stephen Whale, Ross Johnson, Tim Evans, Jammer, Obu, and everyone else. Thank you so much. We're not going to do any more super chat. We don't really do them on here. But since Will Brownlee has just paid $4.99, can we just give a quick review of his wildcard team? Raya, Trent, Gabriel, Lewis, Colwill, Greaves, Saka, Semenyo, Palmer, and Buemo. Rogers, Wood, Haaland, and Stewart. Pretty strong.
Pretty good.
Only the two up front, but he's made that decision.
I think it's pretty good. It's not that template. You've got Colwill in there as a bit of a differential. Most teams that I reviewed this week, and I review a lot, have gone for an eight-man front line. Yeah. Because of the amount of injuries and rotation that we're getting, I haven't seen so many teams with 4.5 mil duds on the bench. So I think if you've got Stewart up front there, I'd maybe try and rejig and push him up to one of the 6 million penalty taking options like Calvert-Lewin or something like that, or just rejig it a bit. But apart from that, your choices are sound. I mean, Colwill's a good reliable backup to Lewis. We'll talk about Lewis, I'm sure, in a minute. Raya, if you are in doubt about Raya's start, you could always find some more money through downgrading him to a Flecken or just staying at Edison, because he's my biggest headache this week is Raya. So pretty similar to my team, as you'll see later. But yeah, I think it's a good team, Will. Agrees. What do you think, Luke?
I'm not passing comment unless I get at least £1 of that £5, Fergie.
What's going on?
So that's the way we go on these days. I'm afraid. Sorry, Will. You're on your own. You have to listen to these mugs. I'm joking.
Yeah.
I'm joking. Palmer's while he's got that Stewart on there on his bench, isn't he? Which is a bit of a nice juicy differential. Yeah. So I think that could work very well. I mean, if he does well over the next two, then you're laughing. But similar to Rich, I don't really like the dead spot, but if it's for Palmer, maybe it works. Yeah,
I agree. It's all on Palmer. It's how much you want Palmer there, and he's where the funds are. Palmer to, Diaz or someone like along those lines would free up elsewhere. But really good team. Just looking at the teams then to target for the next 6 game weeks. So this takes us up to the next international break, which is quite a nice, a nice period. Brentford top 4 games at home. A really lovely run of fixtures, all 6 of them actually. United have got a pretty good run for the next six weeks as well. They're away to Villa next week, but other than that, they've got a pretty good run. Home to Chelsea in 10. Forest again, 4 home in the next 6. Everton have got a really good run as well. West Ham is okay and Spurs is okay. And down the bottom, Brighton's run gets really, really tough over the next few weeks. Newcastle's are quite tough from a defensive perspective anyway, and Fulham and Southampton down there as well. Rich, which are the sort of teams that you will be? Are you looking at them like kind of team specific first, or are there players outside of that who you're going to be interested in?
Well, I think there's some new teams obviously coming through that we may not have featured at the start of the season. You know, you mentioned those 3 teams down the bottom. You know, Brighton, Newcastle, Fulham. We all had players from those sides in our teams to begin with. You know, we were heavy on Newcastle with the likes of Isak, Gordon Hall. We were heavy on Brighton assets with the keeper with João Pedro, etc. You know, and then Minte and like that sort of. Lots of Fulham options. I've still got Robinson sitting in my team just because I've got some money in him. Smith Rowe, extremely popular. Muniz didn't work out. You know, so there's sort of 8 or 9 players I mentioned there in those teams now that we're going to swing away from, and you can probably replace them with players from these same sort of mid-table teams like Brentford, Forest, Everton, etc., and maybe even Ipswich. You know, who've shown a bit of metal at the back. So. They're the teams I think we can replace, as Luke refers to some of the edge pieces with, because they're cheaper and they allow us to to have these 8 or 9 core talisman assets in the teams that we want. So I think I haven't seen a wildcard draft yet without Mbermo in it. You know, I think he's one of the locks. We'll come on to a picture in a minute of those, but Brentford do offer a good goalkeeper option just because of those 4 home games. They're a very good side at home. They're not so great away, but they do perform well at home. And also, Flecken could get a bunch of save points if they throw in a clean sheet. He could be on for bonus. So I like Flecken, but I prefer Raya to him. But yeah, there's a possible cheap midfield option with Carvalho, who made an appearance last week. So I like him. If you're tight on funds like I am, he could be your fifth bench defender or your 8th attacker. And then Everton, they offer a lot of value and a lot of upside. The issue with Everton is they're bottom of the league and they've got 1 point so far, but their fixtures, if we were to do a longer view, they stretch off into the distance, all the way to game week 15, 16. They've got fantastic fixtures and they would be top if you took a longer range view of the ticker. So Calvert-Lewin looks to be fit again, on penalties, 6 mil. Great fixtures, and rotates very well with some of the other popular options. So you will talk. I think there's a little Bournemouth are a little bit further down this ticker for the next 6 weeks. That's probably because they've got 2 magnificent fixtures, Southampton and Leicester, to come. So people are going to play that upside with the likes of Semenyo. But then you can bench Semenyo after that and happily play assets from Everton or Brentford and Forest, around them. And just put Semenyo on the bench through that difficult period of games. So it's about working out those fixture combinations. Is that making some sense?
It is, and when you look at those bottom 3 teams that we just mentioned, looking at kind of Luke's team as an example, I'm assuming you may have had Isak, Luke, or not, but you had a couple of Brighton, a couple of Fulham, and this is with. And this is what we talk about, around the fixture swings, and this is why it's such a good period, because we kind of met like some of those players have done okay, but they're all walk into really, really hard matches now, aren't they? You sold Isak this week or last week, Luke?
I had him for his brilliant performance and 2 points this week, and then I've obviously sold him on Wildcard now. I wish I got rid. His Arsenal as well. I didn't have any Arsenal, but the fixtures were bad, and that's why I didn't really have any. And then they've now gone into, particularly 2 very good ones, and arguably 3. Just to add on that, some other teams as well from what Richard said. I think Spurs now, their run looks pretty damn good. Maybe not necessarily this week or next even, but I think they're okay. And then after that, it seems pretty damn good for a while. I think it's only like Man City that are in there that's probably wouldn't want to play your players in that one. Although think Spurs have got a pretty good record against City overall, haven't they? So you never know. And then Forest is kind of like a stealth one. I don't think they really get talked about that much, but I suppose Chris Wood's been talked about because he's now taken the penalty, which was a bit of a surprise over Morgan Gibbs-White. I'm not sure about any of their other assets, particularly in attack, but in defence, they seem to have some pretty good ones. They've got some nice home games. It's only really that away Chelsea game where I think you could still probably play Wood if you need to, or you could bench him. And then the sort of other 6 fixtures up until at least Arsenal, they work really well. So, yeah, might be some stealth sort of cheap picks there that people could go with. The timing as well with that, when they play Arsenal in game week 12, there's quite an obvious switch there where you can switch back to Pedro, where Brighton go on their really good run. So I like that.
Yeah,
and Cunha as well. We talked about Wolves, I think, before at some point, or I did at some other podcast. Their run starts really good from like 9-10, so maybe not straight away, but maybe you can consider either hiding one or a plan to bring one in at one point.
Yeah, I think look at the wild card timing. Again, it's easy now. And in hindsight, it'll be, why did we wild card back in game week 6? What were we doing? But everything just kind of stacks up, don't it? And and we're very much in the decision phase at the moment. The outcome will obviously follow, but as it stands at the moment, the way you can build a team really, really nicely for the next few weeks, and the team naturally transitions. Then, as you mentioned, sort of, I think there's a few teams, Spurs and a few others, got a lovely run from 8, Wolves from 10, Brighton from 12. You can just move it on, can't you? So no doubt, it's not going to happen like that, as we know. But yeah, it all makes sense. I've got 5 wildcard locks on screen. I think these 5 have been in every draft I've seen. They're certainly in my team. Interested in your thoughts. Mbuemo, Gabriel, Saka, Haaland, and Rodgers are 5 that I think I've seen in every draft. Any debate on any of those?
Not from me. I've got those 5.
I don't think so. No, I think we could safely say they're in. I mean, perhaps if you've had Rodgers from the start, if he hadn't had the 10-pointer last week, people would be wavering. Yeah. But I've been very impressed by his performances. I've owned him since the start. Obviously, that slight bit of profit on him makes me even more determined to keep him because I got him at the base price. So he's great. And actually, if you're not going for Watkins, and spoiler alert, someone here might be, he definitely provides you with some sort of Villa attacking cover for this period because their fixtures are still good and they look like they're handling Champions League pretty well for early days. So I like Rodgers. I like him a lot, and he's very playable. He's not like a bench fodder. You can definitely. In fact, he's more of a bench headache because he is. We
benching him this week in a good fixture. This is it.
Exactly.
And I think the main benefit for Rodgers though is the fact that he's just been playing like 95 minutes every single week.
Yeah, I agree.
Which was probably the surprise part. I think everyone who watched him last season thought that he's probably going to be value. He's probably going to start. I don't think that was necessarily in debate, but maybe he might slip out if his performances weren't good or his minutes might be a slight concern, and that just hasn't been an issue. So I think regardless of what points he's actually returned, most people would have probably looked to hold him, but I understand that obviously the points always help, right? So as soon as people actually see it happen, it sort of locked him in for most people. But
I'd have one more on there.
Just going to ask if anyone has any more.
It probably would be debatable just because of his price, but Trent was an easy keep for me, and with a wild card, I see no reason to get rid of him at 7 million. I just think his routes to points are so strong, and he started the season so strong that. And especially just makes me feel better going without Salah on a wild card to have Trent in the team backing it up. I mean, it may be that we start with Diaz and we lose him, but I just think Trent, I'm just going to keep him all season. So for me, he's be the sixth player on there.
Well, the reason, so on our next one now, it's around the dilemmas, and this is about the budget, right? So this is where, because I had Watkins in my team for a while, which means I couldn't have Trent as an example, and there are alternatives. There's Robertson, or there's double Arsenal defence or wherever else. But this is where the dilemma side comes in, and it's really nice to have these actually again because I'm pretty okay with my team. at the moment, but I haven't got Watkins, I haven't got Palmer, I haven't got Son, I haven't got Salah, I haven't got any of the best players in the game, really. There's obviously a lot of value out there. Firstly, Luke, have you got any more locks? Has no one left you? Is there anyone else who's really obvious for you, or?
No, I think that's covered it. I mean, there's lots of other players that I almost certainly will have, but I wouldn't say they're complete locks.
Yeah.
I'd say even Trent, I agree, he's in my team and I do like him, but maybe not even a lock. I think, because he is quite expensive. Yeah, he's probably just on that borderline. But no, there's no others that jump out like I'm definitely going to have him. I think Calvert-Lewin's probably another one who's close, just because I feel like we kind of need at least one cheap striker. Yeah. We don't need it. You can do what you want, but. Mm-hmm. For most people, they will want a cheap striker, and that guy was Pedro. Not only does he now look like he's out injured, but the fixtures were bad anyway. Yeah. So Calvert-Lewin's basically the next affordable striker who's going to play all the games if he stays fit, which is his main issue, I guess, and he's on penalties. So I think he'll be quite popular with that fixture run as well. So he's probably pretty close for me.
So we're going to throw out a few names to start the conversation. Rich, it'd be good if you can jump in. But on the side, we've got Watkins, Saliba, Eze, Rico Lewis and Luis Diaz are 5 players I've picked out who are really popular, but they're kind of in half of people's teams and not on the other halves. You can chuck the David Raya sort of injury situation in there as well, because if you want to go double down, then you maybe go with Saliba. What are your thoughts on these players? I'm finding it tough leaving Eze out. I got to be honest. He's out at the moment, but I don't want him to be out.
They're all great options, aren't they? And I'm not sure. I think they'll all perform well if you give them the next 6 weeks, which is the window we're looking at to perform in. I mean, I think I've gone for Diaz in my team just because he's a form man in the Premier League at the moment. His form is probably unsustainable at this level, but form is a thing. It's not all about expected points and performing to your year's worth of XG. He's clearly confident. He's clearly shooting from distance. He's clearly having a great time. And he's having had a rest this week when the other 4 forwards all featured in the League Cup. He's pretty much nailed on to start against Wolves, which is a great fixture. So I just think I like his price point. 7.98 million. You can go anywhere from him in the next few weeks. You can go up to a Phil Foden, you can go to a Bruno Fernandes, or you can come down to one of the other players on this chart, Eze, if you want to switch and create some money. So I just really like his price point there, and that's another reason for having him. I don't think I'll have him for ages. I think you're not putting him in for 30 weeks like some of these ones we've mentioned. But Diaz is in for me. I'm not going to talk about Lewis because I want Luke to talk about Lewis. He knows a lot more about him than I do in his prospects. I'm very interested in Rico, but just want a little bit more reassurance on or understanding of what Pep's mindset's going to be. And Eze is one of these ones who's going to regrettably miss out, I think, just because of the other options that I've chosen. I did have him for the first 5 weeks. I've been pretty happy with him, but I just think unless I have to go back to him, I have to generate $1 million on Saturday morning and come down from Diaz or something, and then he's out for me. Saliba, I'm still considering because off the back of the Raya thing, because I want 3 Arsenal, so it's either going to be Saliba coming in or look at the Havertz option up front, and quite like that as an option again, because you can go anywhere from him really, and that lends itself quite nicely. Sort of Havertz for 3 weeks, then go to Solanke, or just start with Solanke and save a transfer. One of those 2 options. So I've said enough. So I'll pass over to Luke, and hopefully he can comment on these guys.
Yeah, please, Luke.
Yeah. So I mean, I looked at all of them again. They're definitely in that pool of 20 to 25. I may well start with Luis Diaz and then move on, but I'm not sure it's worth it. Like, I understand he's doing very well, but he's just, I don't know, I just feel like making that team robust, like I talked about at the beginning, and it's like so often these kind of players can hurt you when I could just have Eze in there, who's, I still just think really good. Like, his data is really good. I know he lost the penalty to Mateta. That was one time. I don't know whether that will continue, but even if I assume it does, penalties seem to be down overall. And even if he only scored 2 penalties for the rest of the season, I still think he'd be a good option. You obviously have Mateta go off at half time, so he's going to split them then at that point at least, isn't he? And I think Mateta might see 70 minutes most games anyway. And he turns up every week and he plays 90 minutes and the data is still good. I mean, if that free kick had been allowed that went in, I had him in my team. I'm assuming a lot of you guys had him as well. And then against Man United, he should have scored. Probably could have even scored a brace in that game. Suddenly he's just not a conversation and everyone's got him. I understand like these first 2 games. I think it's Everton, away to Everton, where they've got a lot of their players back. So you could say, and Palace haven't looked good overall. So maybe people are a bit twitchy there. I can't remember what the next game is. I think it's Liverpool, isn't it? Which is obviously a tougher game. And then after that, the run looks a bit better. So it's like, do you start with maybe a Diaz and then move to him? I just don't know whether it's worth it booking it in. And the thing with Diaz, he's looked fantastic. He's done so well. He can continue, but 5 goals already in 5 weeks. Like, is he going to challenge Haaland for the Golden Boot kind of situation? I imagine that will dip a bit. And then Gakpo's playing so well as well, isn't he? You just know even this week, like, although I believe Diaz is going to start, because I think Gakpo played 90 minutes, didn't he, in Europe? Like when that 70-minute comes up again, you just think he's going to get taken off again. Like for Gakpo, it's pretty sure it's going to happen around that point. Then they've got the Champions League, I think it's versus Bologna.
Yep.
And then they play, is it Palace or someone after that? Suddenly you're in that guessing game again, aren't you? You don't know, is Diaz going to play in their best team in Europe? Is it going to be Gakpo because he's performing really well as well? And then you're in a position where, do you have to make a transfer for the second week? So I'm just not sure I want to put myself in that place. Like, I'm sure it'll be fine. And it feels like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, because that Wolves team, it's been well documented, isn't it? They're ravaged by injuries at the moment. They're not playing well. They've just lost the centre-back Mascara as well. And suddenly, like, your brain starts worrying, doesn't it? And thinks he's going to get braces and hat-tricks. But it happens all the time, right? Like you said, you force a situation and it's not always like a slam dunk that he just... There's a world that exists where he scores 2 or 3 goals and Wolves are a mess, but there's a world where he gets to 70, he's blanked and he comes off and suddenly you're scratching your head for next week because he starts in the Champions League. I don't know. It's a hard judgment to make on him, but I think we talked about him enough. Watkins, I just really like. I've always liked Watkins. I can't really make it work in my team. I say it's strange because we've all got roughly the same money. So if someone else is able to make it work, I probably can as well. But with the players I like for example, Trent, he's quite tricky to get to. I don't doubt that he's probably going to punish me over these next 4. I think it are good, but then he's probably a transfer out for me after that because of the fixtures. So it's like another situation where I'm not sure if I want to book that transfer. So I've kind of edged away from him. And I can talk about Lewis now if you want me to, because that's the one people want me to.
Yeah, I think it's a good time.
Well, I did just to do a bit of a shout out. I don't know if you've listened, Fergie, but I did a Spaces with Praz and Andy. Let's talk FPL. Yeah, couple of days ago, and it's on my Twitter, and I think it's on his as well, where we discussed Lewis in length. And a lot of people who probably listen to that will listen to this. So I don't want to cover too much, and I want to keep it quite short and simple. But for me, like, the easiest way to explain it, how I see it, by the way, so I can be wrong, and other people could be get it right. Man City always start with, in possession at least, they've always got this 3 at the back situation, haven't they? They've always got those 3 players that play at the back. They never play with a flat 4 and pass it across. One player will always go from the defence into midfield in some way. So they'll either move into the centre, into the pivot, move into a number 8. They might even move to like the wing, like Guardiola did last season, right? So there's always going to be one that does that. At the moment, Pep is picking Rico Lewis to do that. A lot of that was probably forced to begin the season. And that's why, do you remember at the beginning of the season, I think you said Fergie Guardiola's an absolute lock for me. And I said, well, I'm not sure about that actually, because he's kind of forced to play Rico Lewis. Yep. And Rico Lewis, we all can see from his skill set and what he does, he can't play in the back 3 like that and sit at the back. He's not built to do that. Obviously, that's a particular skill set, is being, in the sort of pockets, using his agility, connective play. He's never going to do the job that Walker and those other guys do at the back. It's just not going to happen. So at the moment, Pep is picking him to be the one that goes into midfield. We saw, and that's happened every single game, by the way, apart from the Arsenal game, which was a bit of an obvious rest, I would suggest, because he went to his Guardiola and he sort of did the inversion instead. Rico Lewis being a kid, being a bit lightweight, it kind of made sense versus Martinelli, and it probably wasn't going to work. So for the long term, where do we think we go from here? Well, I think Lewis has been playing really well. He has to win the battle every single week. It's not over Walker. It's who's going to be that guy that moves into midfield. Rico does that better than everyone else. So I think in the easier games, you've got a good chance, at least while he's playing this way, that he will look at it and go, I'll pick Rico to do that job. in some of the tougher games, and this is in the simplest term, there are other factors. You might say, "Oh, Gvardiol will do that," and therefore he's not going to play Rico Lewis in this game because he can't sit in the back three, as I just discussed. So he's not going to play every game. He might play the easier games, and as a result of 4.7 million, at least he got some cover. He looks like he could be a decent option. I would just say that if you're gonna be frustrated the first time he doesn't play, or he's benched or whatever, and your team's not got other options, he's got 4 million defenders, I just wouldn't touch it. I just wouldn't do it. You have to be a particular kind of manager to accept it. The players at a certain price, they are value depending on their minutes and their performance. And it doesn't mean every player has to play, 38 games. Rico Lewis is not going to play 38 games. Doesn't matter how good he is. Haaland won't play 38 games. Even Rodri, when he was fit, wouldn't play all 38 games. But we're only playing for this little period for now, aren't we? Sort of 6-7 weeks where the fixtures are really good. Is he going to play the majority of his games? At the moment, I would suggest he probably does.
Wow.
The safer option, though, for me is still Gvardiol. If you want to be more safe, then Gvardiol is the safer option. I talked about this on the pod. There's going to be times where you go for the Gvardiol for the bit of the safety, you pay that 6 million, and then you see Rico Lewis is in the lineup, and you're paying for the left centre backs, and Rico Lewis is off on some sort of Lord of the Rings adventure, like hanging around the box, and it's just not going to feel good when you've paid that extra money. But you get a little bit more security in the minutes. There is a third option. Don't get any of them.
Would you? I think the thing with me, if I go for Trent and double Arsenal defence, which at the moment I think is reasonably likely, or at least a Liverpool defender, double Arsenal defence, it means he'd be my fourth defender. Now, if I had Rico Lewis, with the fixtures they've got coming up, especially all the home ones they've got, I'd be very, very obliged to play him. I think I'd be obliged. You're not going to get him for 4.7 and bench him in these easy home games, which means you're kind of putting yourself in a position, if you are going for the double Arsenal and Liverpool, where you're going to play 4 at the back.
4-4-2, something like that.
Is that something you've thought about at all, or will he be your third defender? Or
yeah, I mean, I understand that, but for me, I don't really like the fact of playing 4 defenders, because as good as the defenders are, they still are probably their most likely score most weeks is 2, even to Arsenal, probably 50% of their games they'll end up getting 2. So for me, it's more treat him like a third defender. Okay. Like maybe you've got Trent and Gabriel, and then you've got, say, Rico Lewis. Yeah. But you have to make sure that 4 and 5 are players that you'd be more than happy to play. And you could have almost like a Brentford Brighton rotation, or a Brentford Ipswich rotation or something, and like have them ready to go as your player that you're happy to come in. I think that's the kind of setup. Or a Porro. Yeah. Porro works quite well with him. I don't know if anyone's looked at that, but you can bench Porro for these 2, start Rico Lewis, and then Porro can come in a tough game and he could get you a goal, right? So that's his sort of bonus, and he's not that expensive. That's the way I've looked at it anyway. Yeah. I don't think having him as like a 5th defender works. It's more like a third with very good 4 and 5s.
I agree. Yeah. If Raya was fit, it'd be so much easier, because you could have the Raya, the Gabriel, the Trent, the Lewis. If Raya's not fit for like a week or 2, will he still be in your wildcard teams? Because this is a thing, but you're still probably going to want double Arsenal defence, I'm guessing, or would you just?
Well, this is it. I've looked at it briefly since this Raya thing started to become an issue, and I think we were. I don't know. I won't call it the community, but a lot of the content has been converging onto this exactly what Luke's just said. Lewis is the third defender backing up a Liverpool and an Arsenal option, and then it's whatever money you've got left to put in 2 solid, nailed picks that at least one are going to play, but also play for teams with reasonable high upside like Brighton, Forest, Brentford, that kind of level of team, who can bail him out for the fixtures that he's a no-show in. So that was fairly easy to put that structure in. And now Raya's out of the picture. It's like the priority seems to shift on, well, where's my third Arsenal asset going to come from if I'm not going to take the Raya gamble? I'm either going to have to pay for Saliba, who's a lot more expensive to fit in, or I'm going to have to go upfield and do it with Havertz, who again is more expensive than some of the other options. So it doesn't make it easy for Lewis to be accommodated, I don't think.
I agree with all that, and the error margin on Lewis here is huge, right? Because the only person who knows really is Pep Guardiola at the end of the day. He's never. I said it on the. I don't want to repeat everything I'm saying, but we're talking about a player who's looked very good. He's obviously fantastic at what he does, but he's not a player who has ever established himself in Pep's team as a player who's going to play every week.
Yeah.
He's not had more than, like, say, 4 or 5 starts in a row, really, at any point. So we're kind of hoping that the way he wants to set up and his performances are going to cause that changing of the guard almost. And so it's not a changing of the guard over Walker. He is competing with Walker. We've seen he started twice with him as well. He can play left side. He can even play as a number 8. It's just, how much do you think he's going to play over that period? Is it enough for him to be value? I think at 4.7 it is, as we've already discussed. But with this Raya situation, I personally wouldn't, like, if Raya's out, you could tell me Raya's 100% out. I probably wouldn't have Rico Lewis, or I'd look at the Havertz, exactly like Richard said, and maybe do it that way. But I think Gvardiol works as well. I think he's going to play. So that's where I think I've got a centre draft to at the moment, Fergie. I think I've got Gvardiol in there over Lewis. But yeah, come back to that error margin. We could just be way off. He could just stop playing. He could play 30 games and be the best player ever. At what point is it a risk when it's just a 4.7 defender that you can probably hide on your bench? And let's say it goes all Pete Tong, you might miss out on points on 1 week. So, for example, he comes on as a cameo and he breaks this whole, I've got a good player on my bench straight away, or whatever. You get 1 point. If you're the kind of manager who's going to go, right, well, I've had enough now, I'm going to sell him. Okay, fine. But then you're committing a transfer to it. But is that the worst thing in the world? Just to go, okay, I'm going to get rid of him and I'm going to get Lewis Dunk for 4.5. It's 1 extra transfer in there. It's not, you're not going to lose out too much, I would suggest, by doing it. But at the same time, if it's going to cause you a ball ache, just forget it.
Really briefly, Luke, could you just give a shout out? Could you just give a shout out to your top third City asset? Is there a City attacking asset that is a valid option over these coming weeks?
I think the attacking one, you have to look at Savio.
Okay.
Again, the price comes into it. He's 6.5 still, I think. He's played every single week that he's been fit for, including in Europe as well. Didn't play in the Cup, but he came on for even 45 minutes. It's just the way the system is at the moment. He wants to use the wingers wide rather than the Gvardiol situation. Yeah. And he's the only real right winger that they've got in their team. Doku can cover there, but he's not very good at right wing, or at least he hasn't been for City. Strange, really, because for Belgium and for team beforehand, I can't remember who he played for now, French team, wasn't it? He was particularly good. But yeah, he's also been really impressive, Savio, whenever he's played. And even watching him, he just looks like a really, really good player. And obviously we have Bob injured, who was the other right winger. So it's not to say that likes of Foden and Silva can't cover him. It's just that he hasn't really wanted to use those players. Pep even come out recently and said he wants Foden in the centre if he can help it. Then we mix in the De Bruyne injury. You've probably got the likes of Bernardo Silva and Foden that have to move into that central area. I actually think Foden will be probably the best one, but it just feels a little bit early to go for him. There's a good chance he played up front, and I don't know how many minutes he played in the cup. Actually, I didn't check, but it might be 90 or close to it. Someone will probably else correct me in the chat, but he could quite easily start Newcastle, and he might even be leaked, and it might tempt people, maybe. But it still feels maybe just a touch early. Might be one you want to move to. I think Savio is the one who's more likely to play, but he's not going to play every single game. I'll come back to it. Even the very best players under Pep Guardiola don't play every single game in the season. No. The closest you get this season it would have been Rodri, but obviously unfortunate injuries had. And then you probably got Haaland, who's in that next bracket, who's less likely to play like most of the other games. After that, everyone else starts to slip down. It's not that too different to some other options, right? And from the top teams, this is, we're talking about the likes of Diaz. We're talking about people like that. They miss games or can miss minutes and people go for them. So it's almost like this, I don't know, like an aura around Pep Guardiola. Some of the fear we've had in the past of he's had these big squads and he rotates and we can't work it out. And then I think it doesn't help when they win the league with 10 games to go and then they start doing whatever the hell they want. And that etches in people's mind like the rotation is going to happen all the time and I can't possibly do it. But generally when the games aren't thick and fast, he kind of sticks very close to the same team. I think if you look at all his lineups so far this season, there's not that many changes he's made in it. And that's quite common practice, but people sort of forget that.
Interesting on Savio. It's not very often we get a reasonably nailed 6.5 million midfielder for City with a really good run of fixtures. He's definitely a really good differential there. I've picked out a few more low-owned picks who could do well. Nicholas Jackson, obviously, everyone's looking at Palmer, but Jackson looks to be, I don't know if you guys feel any differently, but looks to be nailed at the moment and took his goals really well last week. McNeil, mentioned him last week. 5.4 million. I think he could be a cracking. I think the only thing I've looked a bit more this week, and I think because there's so many midfielders you can go for, where you can have Calvert-Lewin as a 6 million forward, probably the forward is the better option there. Bowen, he's had a quietest season, but played up front last week, I think, and their fixtures do turn. Ahmad at 5 million is getting plenty of minutes, and Havertz differential as well. Rich, are there any other sort of low-owned players you've got your eye on at all who could make a difference?
Well,
to our
I mean,
teams?
we haven't mentioned Semenyo yet, have we? I'm not
No.
sure if he's a differential as such, but he's not appeared on any of these slides. He's certainly a popular player in that sort of 5.5 to 6 million bracket that you're seeing on a lot of wildcards. He's made it into my team simply because those two fixtures just look irresistible. And then once you get through, like game week 10, Bournemouth's fixtures are really nice again. So as long as you've got bench cover, and say you're playing with an 8 and you can manage, you're happy to bench Semenyo for those difficult games. You don't have to, but it's a nice first sub, but it's quite an expensive first sub. Then happy days, So he's certainly one I'd mention. I looked at McNeil, but I think like you, I think I'd rather have. I think 2 Everton attackers is too much for the team that struggles to score goals and is bottom of the league currently. So I would go for Calvert-Lewin over McNeil and hope that McNeil provides him with some goals, and that would be fine. Bowen, I just like West Ham are a bit all over the place at the moment, aren't they? I think they're a bit of an avoid. They may pick it up, but the only good thing about Bowen is obviously he doesn't have any European interest, so he's just playing 1 match a week. Whereas if you look at the sort of the more detailed fixture chart that Ben Krellin brought out today, which showed all the different League Cup and European games between now and Christmas, the top teams, they don't get a break.
They don't. It's every week, isn't it? At the moment,
they play every 3 days, and so they're going to rotate, especially around the more junior players. So yeah, Bowen is going to be a talisman. He's going to play every game or most minutes. So if you want that kind of, as I think Luke used the term, robustness, if you want that robust setup to start with, then he's definitely fits that mold.
We agree. Luke, is there anyone we've missed at the moment who got your eye on? Is there any players at all you think?
There's a few cheeky ones. I think Leif Davis is potential as a 4.5 defender. I don't think it's one you'd want to start every week, but if we're talking about like a backup option for Rico Lewis or a rotation piece, I think they've got quite a few good home games. I wouldn't expect too many clean sheets for him, but obviously he could be this year's Doherty, I guess, for Luton. They could chip in every now and then. Or Doherty. Is it Doherty? I've completely mixed up all my Dohertys, Dohertys, and everyone now. So I think he's decent. Maddison, I guess, is performing pretty well on the eye. I'm not really sure about having him right now because away Man United, away Brighton, although Man United will probably give up a load of chances. I'm not sure Brighton will. But then after that, it looks pretty good. So again, if you're going for that, maybe Diaz for 2 and then move on, he might be an option at that point.
Yeah, definitely.
Not 100% convinced on that because every time I go, Maddison seems to get injured. But I can't let that affect me, right? I've got to try and get rid of that bias. So I think he's a cheeky little option that might be pretty good.
His stats are pretty good. FPL Raptor chucked out a tweet this week. I think he had the 2nd or 3rd highest XGI so far this season, which was pretty insane. And obviously it came home to roost last week, and they play this evening, don't they, actually? So it'll be interesting to see if he plays in that. Expect he does.
There is one other one that I'm almost certainly not going to go for, but Martinelli seems to have stepped up his game recently. And if we're looking at the Arsenal problem in the sense that we're not really sure where we'll go if Reyes injured, and maybe you don't want to go to Havertz because you want Solanke or is a little bit too expensive, like Rich said, and then you don't want to go that defender because then you might not play Lewis if you want to go Lewis, then that sort of one midfield spot that I seem to find every time I do a draft in my team ends up with being like Diaz, Eze, Bruno Fernandes even has found his way in there, like a random pick. It's like maybe you could go, well, I'll tempt Martinelli for the next 2. And then their fixtures turn bad 9, 10, 11, don't they? So maybe you can then move it out, and that's like your way out of the triple Arsenal. Again, I don't think I'll do it because I'll probably still worry about the minutes, but maybe he's one that I look back on afterwards and go, oh, maybe I should risk that because I don't think many people will go.
And has Trossard's suspension already been served from last night?
I think it was served midweek.
He served it in the League Cup, didn't he?
Yeah. I always get a bit confused with these sendings off. I'm not sure whether or not sometimes it's the same competition, sometimes it's not. It just seems to check.
I think Reds. I may be wrong. I may be completely wrong. I'm sure the chat will tell me otherwise. But I think Reds, you can serve them
A straight red. If you get given a straight red,
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You can't serve them in a wait. Which way around is it now? You've confused me now. I thought a straight red was the situation where it has to stay in that competition.
It has to,
but
yeah,
accumulation,
exactly.
You can take it over or something like that.
Okay.
But
again, if Trossard is not a threat for this week, that would heighten Martinelli's appeal, wouldn't it? So,
well, I think he was also just stupid. Yeah. So maybe Arteta punishes him anyway. And like I say, that combined with the Martinelli. I mean, he's probably played his best couple of games for Arsenal in a long while. If you speak to Arsenal fans,
I was actually away. I was car sharing with an Arsenal season ticket holder, and you brought it up, but he said, if you're thinking about getting a player that's a bit under the radar for fantasy, Martinelli would be my tip for you. So he's that's what. So
you heard it here first,
right in line with what you said, Luke. So I mean, definitely, it's just it's a crowded space, that midfield, isn't it? So
and completely goes against my aim to be robust. So I definitely won't do it. But good luck.
You're going for him,
take my house.
him and Lewis as well in the same 11 there.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that.
So have a quick look at the predicted points for the next 6 game weeks on Fantasy Football Hub. Haaland top 51.5, Salah 46, Palmer 39, Saka 39, Son 38, Eze 37. We haven't mentioned Isak yet. Really, he's gone down to 8.3. But his predicted points are still really high. The fixtures are still pretty okay for Newcastle. Wood 34, who is an AI hub favorite.
Darling, it's the darling of the hub AI.
He was recommended highly last week, and he went and scored, didn't he? Watkins 34, and Bomo 33, Havertz 33. De Bruyne is still there 32. Obviously, he's an injury risk at the moment. Bruno is in there. We haven't mentioned Bruno. He's another. I wonder if the analytics crew, Luke, will they keep faith in Bruno, or have they seen 100%. Enough? Really?
He's the poster boy. He'll be in most analysts. No, I mean, he may still end up in my team, believe it or not. But there we are.
Well, Maddison, Gordon, Jackson, who we mentioned, Solanke, who's obviously come off the back of a goal. And he was in lots of teams in game week 1, right, as well. So I'm pretty sure. I think I'm going to leave him to game week 8 personally because of the more difficult games. I've got a few free transfers as well, so I can get him in easily. Luis Diaz 30, Gabriel and Cunha. Let's have a look now. We're going to unveil the Hub AI Wildcard team, and it looks like this: Flecken in goal, Fabianski on the bench, Gabriel, Saliba, and Robertson. So it still likes Robertson ahead of Trent. Obviously saves the 1.1 million there. Elsewhere on the bench, Pinnock at 4.5 and Greaves at 4. I think Greaves is going to be the popular 4 million bench player there. Saka, Eze, Mbeumo, Semenyo, and Rodgers, a very familiar looking midfield there indeed. Is sticking with Eze, interestingly enough, even though there are other options. And a front three of Haaland. I mentioned Isak earlier. Isak still makes the team, the Hub AI team, and Chris Wood, the darling, who just keeps scoring every week. Ridiculous XG, but I gotta say, I think it's pretty good. Isak was probably the one in there who surprised me. Well, I'm not surprised by Robertson, but Isak's the only one. He still makes it in. Home to Man City this week, away to Everton, home to Brighton. He's playing. He's playing every week. He's still on penalties. Newcastle haven't looked great, but they're a really good team with really good players. Any critique, gents? I'm sure there's some.
It feels. I mean, it just feels it's a little bit. Feels like game week 1+ is what it feels like. I don't want it to be too.
It probably is because it's data driven.
But Isak has been deserted by just about everybody, hasn't he? Over the last week, his value is plummeting. He's playing City this week. I don't know whether how I don't think Newcastle's fixtures are even that great, are they, moving forward? So I'm just a bit surprised. That's the one I'm surprised about the most, I think. Yeah. Everything else is sensible.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the team looks great, to be honest, overall. I mean, it's very close to what my team looks like, and I think a lot of people's. So I think that's a really good team. It will be, like you said, game week 1+, because like you said, it's data driven. It doesn't put as much weight, I would imagine, on the these 4 or 5 weeks. It is still a very small sample, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you've still got Newcastle striker on penalties up front. So I get it. I'm with Rich and probably with you as well,
Yeah, I think
Fergie,
so.
that you can get rid of him for now, I think, and maybe come back at a later date if you need to. But just seems a lot to spend for those fixtures.
There is. I do think this is capped as well at 100 million. So lots of teams will have that extra sort of $500,000. So it could go up to Watkins potentially.
Isak, I don't know what anyone else feels like, but Isak has trolled me to death throughout his time in the Premier League. So it would not be a surprise now if he starts banging a load of goals versus City, Chelsea, Arsenal, or wherever else he's got after being pretty poor for all the other games that we had him.
Interesting stat from FPL VAS in the chat. Jackson XG 0.76, Haaland 1.14, and Wood 0.55. I think they are locks on attack on the wildcard. Your thought? We touched on Jackson just briefly earlier. Any of you guys interested in Jackson? Seriously, 7.7.
Yeah, I was. I was. I had him in an early draft, and then I sort of started realizing that if I wanted the players I wanted elsewhere in the midfield, and if I wanted to sort of get this Lewis thing accommodated in my defence and keep Trent, etc., that I couldn't afford him. So I've now had to just cope. Well, put Solanke in there as a placeholder at 0.2 cheaper. I think if you can afford him and you've got him already, and you don't mind moving him out as Chelsea's fixtures stiffen, I think he looks great for the next two. But it's a little bit like Semenyo. Semenyo's a bit of a next two games wild card pick that you might want to move it on because the fixture's stiffen. You don't want 4 or 5 players where you might want to move it on because the fixture's stiffen. Yeah. So you've got to just pick the positions where you think, okay, that's not a 6-week view, that's a 2-week plus view. So I do like Jackson. I think if you're not going Palmer, it provides you with something, but I'm still not convinced on Chelsea. I know they've dinged a couple of teams recently, but I still think they're a work in progress, and you never know who's going to play. So if you look at Nkunku scoring a hat-trick, yes, I know it was against, who was it, Barrow last night, or whoever they were playing, he still scored a hat-trick. He could still get a start ahead of Jackson in the next few weeks. So I would probably go with someone like Solanke, or even just the 2 6s on the other side of Haaland.
It always comes back. It's really, really boring. You've got these really potential high upside players, and then it keeps coming back, doesn't it? But we've got players like Eze, Calvert-Lewin, Chris Word, who are just sort of penalty taking solid 90-minute men. It is I
love his redemption arc as a player, though, because he's been slated, hasn't he, for his performances. The casual manager watch him and say he looks terrible, and it's like the data was always there, and it's always, can he convert? He's basically done what everyone expected Darwin to eventually do. He is now seemingly starting to do it. My thing with him that probably wasn't mentioned is just the fact that if you look through all his games so far, 65 minutes game week 1, 67 minutes game week 2. He got 90 versus Palace, then he got 78, and then he got 63 versus West Ham. I think a part of that is West Ham were dreadful and the game was already won. But my worry with him again will be, like Richard said, Nkunku's on the bench. Maresca came out and said that Nkunku's competing with him at centre forward, or words to those effects. He's a fantastic player, Nkunku, and if it wasn't Maresca in charge, we might be all sat here with a midfielder who's banging goals every week, but it wasn't to be. He wasn't going to play. And it would just be my worry that the board's going to go up 60, 70, and he's going to come off. Doesn't mean he can't do the points before that, but I don't know if I want to mess with that. I don't want to mess with multiple players going off all the time. You can't always score 2 goals and get an assist in 60, 70 minutes. Really, not even Haaland can do that every week.
Really annoying watching every game you play, and it's like, 60 minutes, Luis Diaz off, 62 minutes, Rico Lewis off, but and then Nicholas Jackson off. It's really frustrating, but he's a fabulous player. We said this at the end of last season. He's very young still as well. I think he's only 22 or 23. He's very young. And an interesting comment actually in the chat from Rico said, outside of Jackson's last game, he's been lucky with tapping goals. That's the kind of forward I want. The one who's there to score the tapping goals. It doesn't matter how you get it.
Solanke's your man for tapping goals, though, isn't he? Really, That's
the amount of talent Chelsea have got now in all these positions that they keep rotating. They can just grind you down, and it's almost like those last 20 minutes you can bring on like the likes of Nkunku, Felix, or whoever. And if Jackson is on the pitch at that point, he's just going to get chances all the time. The opponents can't keep up having to mark these players for. Just basically 2 world-class players for 45 minutes each is near impossible. So maybe I'm being generous with the world class, but very good players all over the pitch. So it's one of those ones that's got a high risk, high reward situation with Jackson. And so far, he's been going on that side where it's been very, very fruitful. But I'm just worried that he could end up going the other way quite a lot as well. And it's just more secure picks. We're just all boring, aren't we? So we're going to go with the secure ones probably. But good luck to you if you go with it, because he's a good player.
He is. Let's have a look ahead now to game week 6. We've got some stats up from Fantasy Football Hub. Just looking at the 3 teams who are predicted to score the most goals this week. Arsenal home to Leicester are predicted to score 2.51. Liverpool just behind on 2.47. Chelsea 2.18. We talked about a lot about all their forwards, all their attacking options there, and defensively, Arsenal far and away the favourite to keep a clean sheet this week. 62% chance of a clean sheet this week against Leicester. Liverpool 45% against Wolves, and Aston Villa 38% chance against Ipswich. And that leads us on nicely then to the captaincy, which could be a bit boring these next few weeks, I feel. Looking at predicted points this week, Haaland is 8.1, Salah 7.8, Saka 7.2, Palmer 7.1. And in the poll on fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, Haaland 56% of the vote, Saka 18%, and Salah 14%. Luke, what's your thought on captaincy this week?
Yeah, I genuinely would captain Saka if you could tell me that he's going to play close to 90 minutes. I think my biggest concern with Saka at the moment is we played in the League Cup again. Recently, he's had a lot of subs off early. I'm not sure he's 100% at it in terms of the minutes and fitness of where he usually is. So that's just my concern. It's a home Leicester game. I feel like he could get subbed off early. And I was talking to Hedgehog, who's one of the best fantasy managers of all time. If you look at most of the stats that look at these sort of things, and he's an Arsenal fan, and he's very much analytics driven, and it says to captain Saka, but he just had a bit of concerns over he felt like Saka might come off sort of between 70 and 90, and as a result that probably gives me enough to go with the machine, which is what always is telling you, like, how can I not captain Haaland, right? So just that tiny little bit of snippet of, well, maybe he goes off early has convinced me to go Haaland. But I mean, if Saka could still do the damage in 70, couldn't he? And if he stays on longer than that, he probably ends up being at least algorithm-wise, it looks like he probably is the best captain. But we've touched on Newcastle have just looked so bad, haven't they? And we just hope that continues. I just think when Newcastle rock up, at their home ground, they have historically been a very good team. It is a big match. I think they're going to adjust the way they play. I don't think it would be the slam dunk everyone thinks it will be. You always have the chance that a team like Newcastle, where they can set up, can't they, to try and frustrate and try and make the game tough. Will they be able to do it? Who knows? But this is the thing where sometimes form it goes out the window. The form will change at some point. So maybe it's not Haaland's day. They've got De Bruyne out. Foden doesn't look like he's necessarily 100% fit when he's playing 90 in the league. Where's the creative? They've lost Rodri. Previously people would say, well, Man City don't have Rodri, they lose games. I think the stats show that they don't win as many games. This is where we're at the point where you can start creating your narratives whichever way you want to go, aren't you? And you can say, well, maybe it won't be as easy. But I don't think anyone else thinks that. Everyone just seems to be Haaland slam dunk hat trick, which, fair enough. And that's probably what I'll end up doing.
Rich, yourself, anything to add?
I think Luke summed it up really well. Yeah. I'd like to be able to go with Saka. It's clearly the better fixture. It's a home game. And historically Newcastle have put up some tremendous, thunderous performances against some of the big teams at St James's. I think this game might have been 3-3 last season or something, or maybe the season before. So it was it may not be a drubbing, but I've just not been impressed by Newcastle at all. We've all been shipping our players out of there, and they've done very well to get 10 points. I think they've got 10 points, haven't they, out of 5 games? They only lost 1 match, but they just haven't impressed in any of those performances. So I think Haaland's a safe bet. You can't argue with 10 in 5, can you? So
you can't.
I think it's Haaland for me. It's just too terrifying to bet against it at the moment, really.
Yeah, he's just.
If I had Salah, I'd possibly go Salah against Wolves, but obviously I've just sold him. So
yeah,
I think Salah's a good alternative if you have a wild card or you still have Salah in your team. I'd definitely go Salah against Wolves versus Haaland, but I don't own him.
Fergi is a punt for game week 6. Gone for a player this week. I don't think I'm going to pronounce his name right, but I will try my best. But every time I've watched him play, he's looked very, very good. We've touched on his team already. We haven't mentioned him at all yet. He's only got 1 goal so far this season, but he's looked really, really sharp. And he plays for Everton. I think he's about 5.5 million, a cheaper forward than Calvert-Lewin. But Iliman Ndiaye has looked really, really good, I think. And I think if you are just looking for someone a bit different, this is purely if you're looking for someone different, looking for a differential. He's playing all the games. I think he looks really sharp. Fixtures are looking really good. So I think he could be a good pick for the coming weeks as a differential punt. But yeah, like his price. I think he's either 5.4 or 5.6. He's one or the other. I think he's 5.4. So yeah, he's very, very cheap. Same as McNeil. Competition time for our YouTube watchers, and this is the final week we will be running this, but you can win some sensational award-winning curry pies courtesy of Mukherjee's Asian Pie and Catering Company. Simply like the stream and comment on who's going to be the top scoring FPL player of game week 6, and if you're right, you'll win a box of these incredible pies with a choice including the famous Mother Clucker, Creme de la Hen, the Bulldozer, and so much more. They look and taste incredible. If you want some for yourself, click the link in the description below and you can get 10% off your first order. Watching the football with a Mukherjee's pie is a match made in heaven. So don't forget to comment on who will be the top point scorer in FPL this coming week for a chance to win a box for yourself for absolutely free. This competition is restricted for shipping purposes. Scott has just transferred in and die in for João Pedro, and Mikel says he looks a real baller, that kid. So I'm not by myself there, which is good. Just before we reveal our wildcard teams, and this will be the final reminder that to get 50% off Fantasy Football Hub. It finishes this weekend. The 50% off finishes this weekend, and we're still running Win Your Mini League or Your Money Back. So Monday, this offer will stop. So if you haven't joined up as a Hub member, make sure you do. Use the top link in the description below. Grab a bargain, get everything you need to enjoy FPL to its fullest, including winning those mini leagues. Rich, we've got your wild team. Your wild team. It is a wild team. Your wild card team. I hope I didn't upset you.
You cheeky monkey. You cheeky monkey. I sent it over to you, and you said, "No, I want your real team, mate, not last week's."
Brilliant. That's what Adam used to say to me all the time.
Exactly. That's a real endorsement.
I remember I posted my wildcard team one week, and Adam said that team looks like it needs a wild card, and I was like, that you know you're in trouble then, don't you? But Rich, do you want to talk to your team?
Yeah, I mean, look, yesterday I was really happy with this. I'd reached inner peace. I was okay. I had the defense sorted. I had Lewis. I was buoyant on Lewis. I'd watched all the Lewis content. And I mean, you guys the expected minutes are pretty low on there, aren't they? With the expected points there. So I think it's backing up what Luke's going to say. He's not going to play all games, but yeah, he's in the draft and he's in as the third pick. With the interesting to see what you think about whether the backup is strong enough, because I'm tight on money. And to the extent that I've got Mikalenko in there as a 4.3 million option. He appears to be on his way back from illness and will be the first choice player from Everton. So he is a 4.5, and his fixtures are just so good that he's likely to sub in with a good fixture if he's ever needed. And then Greaves again is a nailed on 4.0 for Ipswich again with good fixtures. I'm just not sure that's strong enough. I'm just looking at other options and other teams with definitely more robust players. Like you go Pinnock and Dunk, you're going to get 90, 90, 90, 90, and they're always going to play. Whereas, and arguably from better teams. So interested on the feedback on the backup. The midfield is almost picked itself. It's very template, but it's template for a reason. I would say it's probably the community midfield. It's like Saka, Mbeumo, Semenyo, Diaz, and Rodgers. I've had 2 or 3 of them all season anyway in my team, so I made a bit of money on them. But Semenyo and Diaz are the new boys. Saka's coming back after briefly coming out for Salah. So I'm pretty settled on that. I don't think I'll mess with that at all in the next 48 hours. And then up front, at the moment, we haven't talked about him very much. I've got Solanke in as the sort of the mid-priced option over and above Wood. I think if I need money to try and get a better third defender, he might have to come down to Chris Wood, which I don't think is too bad, to go for the 2 penalty-taking 6s either side of Haaland. But I think if you put Solanke in now, you don't have to make a transfer in game week 8. The only issue I can see myself changing is if doubt continues around Raya, which I think it probably will. I'll go down to Flecken and put Solanke up to Havertz for the next 2 or 3, and then that can come back down of him to anyone in game week 8 onwards. So that's my plan. And as I say, I was happy with it yesterday, but it already feels like it's last week's draft. The game moves so fast.
It does. It's really strong. If you'd have wildcarded on Saturday night, you could afford to do whatever you want, Rich. Instead of instead of take out $1 million. No, it looks really strong. I'm not a fan of. I don't know if it's the red in that visual as well, but it's put me off the Lewis pick even more now. I was just looking. We've actually got Lewis down for. You have to average his minutes. You can't have. I think he's going to play sort of 80, then whatever. We've averaged him at 65 minutes over the next few weeks. But yeah, the points are quite low on him. But other than that, Rich, I think it's a solid team. I actually like the Michaelenko pick in its own right. I think he's a solid pick. I think the fixtures are picking up now. I think a 4.3 is very, very cheap. And
well, it's just that's just my way to make up a couple of the picks I lost.
It's fine. Yeah. Any critique there, Luke?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty much been covered. I think Michaelenko in isolation is good, and I think the good thing about him is that virtually any week for a long time, if he was to come in for Lewis, it's like it's okay, isn't it? But we are talking about. I know they've got Branthwaite back, and it's a Sean Dyche defense, and they were pretty good last season, but so far their defense has been horrendous.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think you'd still have to get pretty lucky that he would come on
and cop a clean sheet,
and actually get you some points. And then you're sort of one injury away from potentially having to use, the likes of Greaves, especially if Diaz doesn't turn up on a week. I know he might be a short-term punt, but I can get it. I mean, I've seen that defense and that midfield all across Twitter, and some very good managers have got it. For me, I probably would just want, maybe I'm just being extra secure, but it's just that whole thing of being robust. I keep saying it, but I didn't do it enough at the beginning. It's now my chance to do it on Wildcard, and every single time I get tempted into what about this shiny toy for 2 weeks, and what about if this guy's minutes are good, and then before you know it, you're just one Kevin De Bruyne injury away from an absolute nightmare, or one slight thing happening, and it's just always thinking what the worst can happen. But there's plenty of people who will get away with it, and the team does that. I mean, at least Greaves played. The thing about Greaves is the fixtures are still good, and at least he plays. But Michaelenko and Greaves are probably going to get you 2 points every week if they do come in, aren't they? I think the Rodgers thing, a lot of people are actually using him as a fourth midfielder, and then maybe having a Dibbling, which as the fifth one, which does give you a lot of money. And although that you could say that's not as robust because Dibbling might not play every time, the fact that Rodgers just keeps playing and plays 95 and looks good, I feel like I'm going to bench a lot of Rodgers points coming up because he's on my bench this week.
Well, the one drawback with that team is that it almost like I have to bench Rodgers or DCL this week. I don't want to bench either of them. So
yeah. And I know Semenyo kind of solves that in a few weeks because he'll end up being on the bench for that bad run, doesn't he? But I think Rodgers' games there are okay, but then one of them's pretty bad from memory as well. So I just think if there's a way that you would generate money, that's a way that you could you look at Rodgers as a fourth anyway. I've kind of shied away with it, but it's an option that people could look at if they've got low value and then they want to improve their defense. But overall, I mean, this is just being hypercritical. I think the team's really good, and I've seen it's very template. Hopefully that doesn't offend you, but it's
no, it's not. I promise you, I got there on my own.
Of course.
No, it's really strong. Yeah, the benching headache is the thing. I've got a similar on my one. We just had a comment off Don Barr just asking in the chat why Semenyo over McNeil on Wildcard. I think they're much of a muchness, but obviously with Calvert-Lewin up front as well, as as Rich alluded to earlier, you're not going to want double Everton, and Bournemouth are scoring more.
Yeah.
He is a really good, robust pick, McNeil. He's just going to play every week.
I really like
him.
He's
on set pieces. He's basically like the David Luiz almost of last season, where he probably doesn't look that sexy, but he's going to turn up and probably get you points. The only thing is he just doesn't really shoot or score. I know we've got he does score a worldie somehow every now and then, but it's very much weighted to assists. And with Semenyo, he's very much more weighted to goals, isn't he? And goals are just
most shots other than Haaland, isn't it, or something?
Yeah. So I think he's had 24 shots or something.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And we know goals are overpowered this season, right? They come with bonus. Look, literally, if you score a goal, you're getting bonus. So
yeah, exactly that. Good stuff, Luke. We've now got your draft. It does say you've got a 0.9 million over, but that's because we entered this in all late. But you've got 98% team rating, which is pretty impressive, and a 94% game week rating as well. So that is pretty much as strong as it gets. Do you want to run us through it?
And I promise you, I came to that by myself.
Don't lie. You went to fantasyfootballhub.co.uk and you signed up as a member.
Oh, sorry. Of course I did.
It's just
Look at me, that £2.50.
Exactly.
I'm still waiting for it to come up on the screen for me, because I still can't remember which one I've sent you, because like I say, I've been tinkering all week. But I think it's basically my more boring version that I've sent you. Like, I have got other sexier ones, or what I consider sexier, but whether I'll go for them or not, I don't know. It's pretty much just Gvardiol in place of Lewis.
Yeah.
Compared to Rich's team. And then I've got Eze in place of Diaz. And it just means that I've also got Dunk, I think, from memory as well on the bench, who hasn't got great games, but he's just a player that I think after this run, if I can get away with that defence, he suddenly has a couple of good games where he can cover either Trent or Gabriel in this run. I think home to Wolves is one of them from memory, maybe 9 or 12 or something like that. And then after that, most people will probably want to move to Brighton players from 12, and I've already got him sat there. So it's just kind of like a more boring version, I guess.
And you've gone for Solanke. You've gone for Solanke too in this draft. Are you how nailed on is he for you, Solanke?
He's pretty nailed on for me. I think I do like the Wood option, and I could look at that, but I always just felt that Solanke was. It's not just because he finally scored last week and Spurs finally looked good. I just felt like even at the beginning of the season, he was an option that could be really good. And I'll keep saying it. I just want to play the fixtures, and I think around his price as well, you have got some other options that, like with the likes of Calvert-Lewin and Wood. If one of them does break, you're suddenly sort of scrambling around looking at like Strand Larson from Wolves, or because assuming Pedro's out, or maybe you have to get a little bit more money to go to Cunha. Whereas with Solanke, you've kind of got Jackson near him. Maybe you can go up to Havertz. There are a few more options, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I just, the other thing with him is the penalties, right? We don't know for sure where they go. I'm pretty sure they'll probably go to Son, but at the end of the day, anyone can say anything right now, and they don't know for sure, do they? It could even be they chop and change him. It could be they give him Solanke for, who knows, right? Who knows where they're going to go? If he suddenly gets penalties, I think that he goes up another notch as well, and then people will scramble to him. And if he doesn't get him, I think he's still good. So that's another factor there.
No, he's a safe option, isn't he? It may take a few weeks to start to pay back, but it's a safe play. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. It's very safe, and as you've just locked the defense in there, haven't you? It's just the same three every week. No, I mean, have you got good team value? Have you got like strong team value for this?
Don't think it's massively strong, because I started with Bruno. I didn't start with Kwanzaa, so that's probably helped me against people. But I did have Nkunku, I did have Lewis Hall, I did have who else went down? Bruno Fernandes. Okay. But it's okay. I think the average is really low. Like this season, the price changes are just crazy, aren't they? There's only a few people going up, and everyone's just dropping all over the place. So not many people have got that money. My other version of this is pretty much just Lewis over Gvardiol and spending the money elsewhere, which may end up in Eze going to Diaz and looking a lot more like Rich's. So I don't know which way I'll go yet, but we'll see. And then
what will you do if it's gloomy about Raya? Will you just risk it that he plays?
I'm not going to risk. I'm convinced that he's okay and he's just going to play, and I hope that we'll get some sort of information that's going to tell us he's in training or something like that, and then I'm kind of just hoping for best case scenario at this point. If we just get none and there's nothing else, I'm probably going to have to change it. And I haven't thought too much about that. But the initial instinct for me was I'd still want a Man City defender. So I'd probably look at Solanke to Havertz for 2 or something like that and then move him out. That's probably where I'd end up going. But where I'd get that money from, I'll have to have a rejig.
Good stuff. Nice team there, Luke. Onto my one as well. Mine's showing as 0.5, but again, it's the change of the week. I've also got a 98% team rating, but 96% game week rating. So just look, my team value is 101.1. I'm not sure if that's any good or not, but I think I avoided a lot of drops and I got some rises, so I think it's probably pretty good. This is my team at the moment. There was a really good comment in the chat earlier. Next week, I think Liverpool and Palace is the early match, so we'll probably get a leak on Luis Diaz. I think he's probably guaranteed to start this week, I would say. But yeah, a leak for Luis Diaz next week would be incredibly useful. I've got 3 free transfers as well, so there's a little bit of forward thinking hopefully baked into this. So I've got Flecken in goal. If Raya is fit, I'll be going Raya. At the moment, I've got Gabriel, Saliba, and Trent. Michaelenko, as I say, I do like him actually, and Greaves. I think Everton improve. Dyche, sort of Dyche-esque. So I think Everton will do okay. I think their fixtures haven't been the best. I think they'll get better. Saka, I just can't get rid of Eze at the moment. There's this whole, Eze versus Semenyo, McNeil. Semenyo's been really good, but back to the robustness. The name of this pod has got to be robust, right? But Eze is just there, and I quite like the fixtures still for Palace. 90-minute man, maybe on penalties. I think he's been incredibly unlucky so far this season. I just like him. And Buemo and Luis Diaz and Rogers bench at the moment, but I'm not really happy with that. And I've gone for Haaland. Calvert-Lewin was a late addition after looking at some of the data and stuff. And I've gone with the Herb AI recommendation of Chris Wood. Just been ignoring him all season. He keeps doing it. Appreciate the point about not being able to get it really quickly to a more expensive forward, but this is where my 3 free transfers could come into play quite nicely. I do like Solanke. I think it's game week 8, so I can just take a view in a couple of weeks there and maybe make. If I, obviously wildcards, and now I would hope to save in 7, go into 8 with 4 free transfers. Hopefully, obviously, things can happen there, but. If Raya is fit, I'll go Raya. I'm not quite sure what downgrade I'd make in defence yet. I'd probably have to find 5 million. Porro, I still like Porro. I just love that kind of player. You just get a goal out of nothing, and get that huge haul. But yeah, in all fairness, I think all our teams are much of a muchness. I think we've used a player pool in our starting 11 of about 14 players in our overall squad, maybe 18. Much of a muchness, but all really strong and looking good and excited for the coming weeks. Anything to add at all, Rich?
No. It's good to see a little bit of variation in what we've chosen. As I say, there's no no matter how much content you listen to, there's no one solution here. And I think it's just important to, if you are wildcarding, just to get a team that you're happy with personally. And I think I found this very useful. Certainly crystallize my thoughts. I'll spend the tomorrow iterating on it some more, and I expect as usual, I'll be making some frenzied changes in the last hour on Saturday morning, while we're watching some deadline streams or something. So the usual panic, but yeah, it's about playing the long game here, and I'm taking away the word robustness from this pod, I think.
though that was Jonas's coaching, if you remember, at the start of the season as well. He was very, very thing on sort of 90-minute starters, and I think that's helped me a lot so far this season. I would definitely have gone for a few dodgy punts had it not been for Jonas's words sort of ringing in my ears.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think someone comes in a business context. Sometimes you see it, don't make the same mistake twice. Yeah, we've set up teams only a month ago, and most of us have had 4 or 5 players who have either been dropped, rotated, got injured, and that will continue. We will, in 4 or 5 weeks' time, 4 or 5 of the players in these drafts will have been dropped, rotated, or injured. And we want to have a bank of transfers that we can use proactively rather than to fix it, don't we? So
yeah, that's where the hidden value goes, isn't it? And the other thing is that people always seem to forget is that the robust picks can just outscore the other picks. Happens all the time. Konsa scores 12-pointer or whatever it is. Like he's like seen as the most boring pick ever. It wasn't 12 in the end. They lost a load of bonus, didn't they? But it was like 9 points in the end. But yeah, it can happen all the time. These players that people are seen as unsexy just do points as well. That's why they're
plodding away, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, I think your team, Fergie, the fact you've got free transfers means that I feel like you probably can go there like a little bit more out there if you want to, right? With someone like me who's only got one, that's why my team probably looks a little bit robust. And I'd say Rich is probably in between us. Yeah. So that does definitely play into it. I mean, we're all sitting here hoping that Calvert-Lewin basically stays fit for about 8 or 9 weeks, aren't we, as well? So that would be my number one.
That'll be a record, won't it?
Yeah. So that if that happens, Fergie, where are you going from Calvert-Lewin with free transfers? It's probably okay for you.
Yeah, definitely. And
other people.
And I think if I didn't have the 3, I would shift it about, and I wouldn't have the 2 6 million forwards, because I'm sure at some point I want to go up to Solanke, Jackson. I still might. I'm still like I could go Raya 4.5 defender, and I'm tempted by Jackson. I really do like him. I think he's going under the radar because of his reputation. But actually, his reputation this season, if you've only started watching football from game week 1, it's absolutely fantastic. So, but anyway, interesting comment from Mikkel. Really good feedback. I like it, Fergie. Haven't seen this team 100 times already. That just about says it all there, don't it? But that
tells you it's probably pretty good.
Well, this is it, Luke. Positive spin. I like that. Glass half full, Williams. That is it from us for this week. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us in the chat. Those going to watch it back, and those listening on the podcast version, your support is very, very much appreciated. And Rich, thank you so much for joining us this week. Where can people get hold of you?
At Rich Clarke FPL on Twitter.
Fantastic. And Luke, as always, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, mate. And where can people get hold of you?
At dis_FPL on Twitter. That's about the only place I post these days. And I occasionally do a podcast, Inspected Goals on YouTube when we can be bothered. So check that out if you've got time.
Thank you so much, Luke. My handle on Twitter is at FFH_Fergie. This podcast and video will be on the Fantasy Football Hub YouTube channel, with the podcast versions available on all major podcast platforms. Don't forget the 50% offer finishes this weekend. So if you are on the fence, just go on ahead and do it. You won't regret it. If you like what you watched, please press the like button. Remember to subscribe to the channel in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. If you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast and leave a comment. We'll be back next week to preview Game Week 7. In the meantime, we hope you have a good wildcard if you are on wildcards, a fantastic Game Week 6, and may all your arrows be green. Good night, all.